Okay, we are holding on Daf Hey Amud Alef, which is really on Daf Dalit Amud Bet, all the way towards the bottom, the Chazara of Kiryat Masechta. So it says the Gemara, Umitakenin et kilkulei hamayim shebirshut harabim. So we said in the Gemara, the last thing, in the Mishnah rather, one of the things we mentioned in the Mishnah is you're allowed to fix the kilkulei hamayim, these water tanks that are in a rishut harabim. So says the Gemara, Chatita in chafira lo. What do you see from here? It says you're allowed to fix the kilkulei hamayim, the water tank. So Chatita in, cleaning them out, yes, that you're allowed to do. But chafira, but digging them anew, that lo, you're not allowed to do. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela she'en rabim tzrichin lahem. Says Rabbi Yaakov in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you know what situation we're talking about? She'ein rabim tzrichin lahen. When the public doesn't need them. Aval rabim tzrichin lahen, but if the public needs it, then afilu chafira mutar. Even digging it new from scratch would be mutar. So now we're going to challenge this. Says the Gemara, V'chi rabim tzrichin lahem mishari. You're telling me that when the public needs it, it's mutar? Is that really true? It's mutar? V'atanya, we have a braita that says as follows: Chotitin borot shichinu ma'arot shel yachid ve'en tzarich lomar shel rabim. You're allowed to clean out pits and wells and caves of water that belong to an individual. You're allowed to clean them out, and all the more so that belong to rabim, that belong to the public. Ve'en chofrin, but you cannot dig borot shichinu ma'arot shel rabim, these wells, water tanks of the public, and all the more so of the yachid. So what do you see from here? It seems like you're not allowed to dig a water tank for the public, even for the public. So says the Gemara, "My love b'shirabim tzrichim lahem." Aren't we talking about a case where the public needs it, and still you're not allowed to dig? So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case of the Braita. B'she'en rabim tzrichin lahem. We're talking about a case where the public does not need it. So now, the thing is, you have to be consistent in this Braita. The Braita said cases of a private individual, privately owned water tank, and cases of a public water tank for the public. So if you're going to tell me that the case for the public water tank, when it says you're not allowed to dig it, that's talking about when they don't need it for the Chag. So that means that also in the case of the private water tank, it's talking about when it's not needed for the Chag. And what did it say? It said you're allowed to clean it out, which would mean you're allowed to clean it out. You're allowed to clean out this private water tank for even though they don't need it for the Chag. Now the Gemara says that's not true. So dekavata gabe yachid. Similarly, accordingly, when it comes to the yachid, the individual, the privately owned water tank, shein yachid tzarich lahem chatita mishari. When the private guy doesn't, the yachid doesn't need it, you're allowed to clean it out? You're not allowed to clean it out. We're going to prove that. Vatanya, it says in a braita, borot shichinu ma'arot shel yachid. You have these water tanks of a yachid, konsin ma'im latochan. You're allowed to put water in it. Aval lo chotitinotan. You're not allowed to clean it out. Lo shafin et sitkehen, and you're not allowed to rub plaster on its cracks. V'shel rabim, and the one that belongs to the public, chotitinotan v'shafin et sitkehen. You're allowed to clean them out. You're allowed to rub plaster on the cracks. So what do you see from that braita? When it comes to a privately owned water tank, are you allowed to clean it out on Chol Moed? It says no. So it must be that when you don't need it, at least you're not allowed to clean it out. So ve'elamai. So the Gemara says, okay. So rather what? B'sheyachid tzarich lahem. So you want to tell me that first braita is talking about when the private guy needs it. So and that's when he's allowed to do it. That would mean that by the public water tanks, that's talking about when they need it also, and you're not allowed to dig. That's not true. Similarly, or accordingly, really, when it comes to public-owned ones, then it would come out that you're not allowed to dig them from new. And is that really asur? Chafira mi asir, is it asur to dig them? Vatanya, it says in the Braita, Borot shichinu ma'arot shel yachid, konsin mayim letochan. If you have these wells, water tanks of a yachid, you're allowed to put water in it. V'choteti notan, aval lo shafinet sitkehen. You're not allowed to put plaster on the walls. V'lo chotetin letochan, v'lo sadinotan besid. You can't plaster the whole thing. V'shel rabim, the ones that belong to the rabim, chofrinotan v'sadinotan besid. You're allowed to dig them and you're allowed to coat them with plaster. But what do you see? You see you're allowed to dig when it comes to a public-owned one. So elakashi ach kamaita. So we have a kasha from that first braita, meaning the first braita is the problematic one, because the first braita said if it's privately owned, you're allowed to clean it out, and if it's publicly owned, you're not allowed to dig a new one. So those two things can't coexist, because if you're going to tell me that it's talking about when it's needed for the Chag, so we have a braita that says you're allowed to dig a new one for the public. And if you're going to tell me it's talking about you don't need it for the Chag, we have a braita that says you're not allowed to clean it out for private. So either way, you learn the braita, those two halachot that it says can't coexist. So the Gemara says, Tarit hachi. You have to answer up like this. It says, Chotetin borot shel yachid. The braita, the first braita really means to say like this. You're allowed to clean out borot of a yachid, the water tanks of a private individual, b'sheyachid tzarich lahem, when the yachid needs them. Ve'in tzarich lomar b'shel rabim, kisher rabim tzarichin lahem. All the more so, you don't need to say that same is true when it comes to public ones when they need it. Because you know what? When the public needs it, you're even allowed to dig. So this braita is accompanying, it's making it work out with both halachot. You're not allowed to dig the borot shechinu ma'arot shel rabim of the public, b'she'ein rabim tzrichin lahem, when the public doesn't need it. Because when they do need it, you are allowed to, like we just mentioned. Ve'ein tzarich lomar shel yachid, or the more so of the yachid, you're not allowed to dig. De'chikein yachid tzarich lahem afilu chatita nami asur. When the yachid doesn't need it, chatita is also asur. Cleaning it out is also asur. Okay, Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, matniti nami deka. You could also be medayek this from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah also works out with this. Tiktani osin kol tzorchei rabim. It says in our Mishnah you're allowed to do kol tzorchei rabim, all of the needs of the rabim. Kol la tuye mai. What's kol coming to include? Lav la tuye chafira. Isn't it coming to include that you can even dig? Kol tzorchei rabim, all the needs of the rabim, even digging a new well. So Gemara says lo, no. La tuye hadetani is coming to include the following list. It says yotzin lekavetzet derachim. You're allowed to go out on Chol Moed, or they would send out people to take the thorns out of the roads. Ultakenet rechavot, and to fix the roads. Veta istarot, ve lamud mikvot, to do all these things. To we have our vit. Okay, to measure the mikvehs. V'chol mikveh she'ein bo 40 sa'ah, margilin otocho 40 sa'ah. They would put 40 sa'ah in it. Uminayin she'im yatzu v'asu kol elu shekol damam shenishpechu sham ma'aleh aleim ha'katuv ki'ilu hem shefachum. How do we know that if somebody does this, it's as if they spilled the blood? Talmud lomar v'haya alecha damim. Pasuk says it'll be on you the blood. So the Gemara says, "Ha behedia katanila." I can't be including this list because this list, behedia katanila, it specifically mentions this list. It says in our Mishnah this list. So kol cannot be coming to include something that it says in this list. Amen. And it must be including chafira, digging, and what is allowed.